It started with a single photograph taken beneath the chandeliers of a London gala. Princess Anne, standing beneath centuries of royal history while wearing a tiara many believed had been locked away forever. But it was not the jewels themselves that sent shockwaves through the palace. It was Queen Camilla's reaction. Witnesses whispered she left the ballroom in tears, her expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and humiliation. And within hours, courtiers were already calling it the most deliberate royal message in years. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, many believed the image had to be misleading. The Tudor tiara had not been seen in public for years, and according to persistent palace whispers, it was never expected to return to ceremonial life again. Yet there stood Princess Anne, calm and unwavering, wearing the piece with the kind of quiet authority that instantly changed the mood inside the gala. Reports suggest even veteran royal aides looked visibly unsettled as she entered the room. Because within aristocratic circles, the tiara carried a reputation far beyond diamonds and tradition. It was said to be tied to Queen Elizabeth II's private wishes, protected through invisible understandings known only to the most trusted figures surrounding the late monarch. That was why the reaction from Queen Camilla became impossible to ignore. Sources close to palace staff claim Camilla froze the moment she noticed the jewels, her composure slipping in a way rarely witnessed in public life. The atmosphere inside the gala reportedly shifted within seconds. Conversations lowered. Senior aristocrats exchanged nervous glances. Guests who had spent years navigating the silent tensions of royal life immediately sensed that something much larger was unfolding beneath the polished surface of the evening. Insiders whisper that tensions between Anne and Camilla had already been building quietly for months, particularly over questions of legacy, ceremonial authority, and the protection of Queen Elizabeth's most guarded traditions. But until that night, those conflicts had remained buried behind palace walls. Anne's appearance changed everything. Royal commentators quickly began questioning whether the decision had been symbolic rather than ceremonial, because Princess Anne was never known for accidental gestures. Every movement carried discipline. Every choice carried meaning. And wearing the so-called forbidden Tudor tiara felt less like fashion and more like a declaration. Reports suggest Camilla attempted to continue the evening as normal, but observers noticed a visible change in her demeanor. Witnesses claim she avoided prolonged conversations, declined interactions with several senior aristocrats, and eventually departed earlier than expected while avoiding photographers waiting outside. That alone intensified speculation across royal circles. Why would a single tiara provoke such an emotional response unless it represented something deeper? Palace insiders soon began whispering about old disputes tied to the jewels themselves, disputes allegedly connected to Queen Elizabeth's final years and the invisible hierarchy that still governs the House of Windsor. Some even claimed the tiara had quietly become the center of an internal royal disagreement over who truly represented continuity inside the monarchy moving forward. What made the moment even more striking was the behavior of Prince William and Princess Catherine throughout the evening. Multiple observers noted how unusually close they remained to Anne during the gala, fueling speculation that alliances inside the royal family may already have shifted long before the public noticed. Their silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. And as media headlines exploded overnight, one chilling realization began spreading through the palace corridors. Princess Anne may not have been wearing the tiara simply to honor history. She may have been sending a warning about legacy, about loyalty, about who Queen Elizabeth truly trusted to protect the crown when the monarchy entered its most fragile chapter yet. But the tiara itself carried a history far darker than the glittering diamonds, suggested a legacy rooted in royal betrayal, hidden decrees, and a warning Queen Elizabeth may have left behind. Long before the Gala scandal erupted, the Tudor tiara had already earned a dangerous reputation inside royal circles. Palace historians rarely mentioned it publicly, and when they did, their language became strangely careful. Because according to whispered interpretations of royal archives, the jewels were never simply jewels. They represented legitimacy, bloodline, and the invisible hierarchy that governs the House of Windsor behind closed doors. For decades, the tiara was said to exist in that strange royal space between possession and permission. It belonged to the crown's story, yet it did not appear freely. It was admired, protected, and quietly removed from casual discussion, as if those closest to the monarchy understood that some heirlooms carried more danger than beauty. Reports claim its origins were tied to early 20th century inheritance tensions, when questions of rank, duty, and rightful place were not merely private family matters, but matters of national symbolism. A jewel could flatter a woman, yes, but in the House of Windsor, a jewel could also crown an argument. That was why Queen Elizabeth II's alleged restrictions around the piece became so important. Insiders have long whispered that the late Queen treated certain royal ornaments almost like constitutional objects, not accessories. They were to be worn only when the wearer represented something deeper than status. Not ambition, not marriage, not personal reward. Duty, continuity, bloodline, the quiet, unforgiving code that shaped her reign from beginning to end. And if those whispers are true, then the Tudor tiara was not hidden because it lacked beauty. It was hidden because it carried too much meaning. Over time, the tiara allegedly became associated with what some palace voices called senior bloodline protocol, a phrase never confirmed, yet repeated with enough caution to make royal watchers listen. It suggested that certain symbols belonged only to those seen as guardians of the monarchy's direct inheritance, those who served the institution without trying to bend it toward personal advantage. That is where Princess Anne's connection to the artifact became impossible to ignore. Anne, the iron-willed daughter of Elizabeth, had spent her life refusing softness, refusing drama, refusing the easy glamour of royal privilege. To her admirers, she was not merely a princess. She was the keeper of the old standard. And then came Camilla. Royal insiders suggest she may have hoped the tiara would one day appear in her own ceremonial future, not as rebellion, but as recognition. Yet recognition inside the monarchy is never simple. Every honor has a shadow. Every jewel has a memory. And for those who believed Queen Elizabeth had left behind quiet boundaries around her most sensitive heirlooms, Camilla's rumored interest may have touched a nerve far deeper than anyone outside the palace could understand. That is why historians connected to royal coverage began comparing the controversy to earlier jewelry disputes involving succession, legitimacy, and the dangerous question of who gets to embody the crown. Palace aides refused to explain why the tiara had disappeared from public circulation for so long, and that silence only made the mystery louder. Because when the palace says nothing, it is often not because there is no story. It is because the story is too explosive to survive daylight. And as whispers about the tiara's meaning spread through aristocratic circles, insiders began revealing what may have happened behind palace walls only days before the gala began. 3 nights before the gala, a private meeting reportedly unfolded inside Clarence House, one so tense that even longtime staff described the atmosphere as icy. No official agenda was released. No photographs emerged. Yet by morning, rumors were already racing through royal administrative circles that Princess Anne and Queen Camilla had engaged in what one insider described as a brutal confrontation over royal legacy. According to those whispers, the meeting was not supposed to be dramatic. It was meant to be procedural, another quiet conversation about ceremonial planning, future appearances, and the careful allocation of royal pieces for public duties. But inside the palace, procedure can quickly become power. A name placed on a list can become a statement. A jewel assigned to one royal and denied to another can become a verdict. And when the conversation allegedly turned toward the Tudor tiara, the mood shifted from cautious discussion to something far more dangerous. Anne, reports suggest, questioned why certain royal jewelry allocations were even being reconsidered. To her, protected heirlooms were not bargaining chips, not emotional rewards, not symbols to be handed out in order to soothe wounded pride. They were pieces of national memory, pieces of her mother's reign, pieces of a system that had survived abdication, scandal, divorce, and public grief because someone always understood where the line had to be drawn. And Princess Anne, more than almost anyone, had built her life around drawing that line without apology. Camilla's advisors, according to palace whispers, had pushed for expanded ceremonial privileges, arguing that the Queen deserved fuller access to the symbolic language of monarchy. On the surface, that argument may have sounded reasonable. Camilla was not an outsider anymore. She had stood beside Charles through decades of controversy, climbed from public hostility into royal acceptance, and taken her place at the center of the institution. But for Anne, insiders claim, that was exactly why caution mattered. The crown could forgive, it could adapt, it could absorb pain. But it could not rewrite every boundary simply because the present demanded comfort. Charles was said to have looked exhausted, trapped between wife and sister, between private loyalty and inherited duty. Palace insiders claim he did not want another confrontation, especially not one that risked reopening old wounds about Queen Elizabeth's final wishes. But Anne allegedly refused to soften the issue. She reportedly invoked her mother's protected legacy, reminding those present that certain objects had been kept away from casual use for a reason. Not because of vanity, because of meaning. Because once sacred symbols were treated like personal possessions, the monarchy itself began to look like a family argument rather than a national trust. Staff members were allegedly instructed not to discuss the meeting externally, a command that only deepened the sense that something serious had occurred. Royal commentators later noted that Anne rarely intervenes unless she believes the institution is being pushed toward a mistake. She does not chase headlines. She does not perform outrage. Her silence is usually discipline. So when she acts, the palace listens. William's quiet support reportedly added weight to her position. Not loud, not theatrical, but present enough to be noticed. And as references to future coronation symbolism began to surface, the tension hardened into something larger than one tiara. But what transformed the disagreement into a full royal crisis was not the argument itself, it was Anne's decision to answer it publicly before the eyes of the entire nation. The ballroom fell silent the instant Princess Anne stepped through the entrance. Not because of applause, not because of ceremony, but because resting above her brow was the Tudor tiara, the one many insiders believed had effectively vanished from royal rotation. For several seconds, even veteran photographers appeared stunned. And across the room, Queen Camilla reportedly stopped mid-conversation as the reality of the moment settled in. Within moments, the entire gala seemed to rearrange itself around Anne. Conversations that had been easy and polished suddenly lowered into careful whispers. Guests who had spent years reading the silent language of royalty understood that this was not a simple fashion choice. It was too deliberate, too loaded, too impossible to dismiss. Reports suggest several senior aristocrats immediately recognized the significance of the piece and exchanged the kind of restrained glances that speak louder than public statements. The tiara had returned, and it had returned on Anne. That detail mattered, because Princess Anne was never associated with empty glamour. She did not chase attention, and she did not use ceremony as decoration. Her public life had been built on discipline, endurance, and a hard-edged loyalty to the monarchy her mother left behind. So when she entered wearing a jewel many believed was buried inside the private chambers of royal memory, the message felt unmistakable. It was not sparkle. It was strategy. It was symbolic warfare disguised as elegance. Camilla, according to witnesses, appeared visibly shaken as the evening unfolded. She was said to have maintained her composure at first, but those nearby reportedly noticed the shift in her expression, the sudden restraint, the careful distance she kept from the center of attention. For a queen who had survived decades of public judgment, the moment was humiliating precisely because it needed no explanation. Anne had not accused her. She had not confronted her. She had simply arrived wearing the one object that turned every unspoken palace rumor into a living question. And then, the room began choosing its gravity. Senior royals, according to whispered accounts, subtly moved toward Anne throughout the night, creating an unmistakable sense that the old guard had gathered around her. Catherine's warm interaction with Anne only deepened the speculation. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. But inside monarchy, warmth can be political, proximity can be declaration, and silence can be sharper than any official statement. Observers quickly began asking whether Catherine's ease beside Anne signaled a wider understanding between those who believed Queen Elizabeth's legacy had to be guarded without compromise. Royal aides reportedly tried to redirect the evening back toward charity, ceremony, and the official purpose of the gala. But the effort collapsed almost immediately. The press did not want the program. Guests did not want the speeches. Everyone wanted to know why Anne had worn the tiara, why Camilla looked unsettled, and why the palace seemed suddenly desperate to move attention elsewhere. By the time fashion commentators began calling the choice a historic gesture rather than a style moment, the damage had already been done. Camilla's early exit only sharpened the mystery. Reports claim she left without addressing waiting reporters, avoiding the moment when one question could have turned discomfort into crisis. But the silence followed her anyway, spreading through headlines, drawing rooms, and palace corridors like smoke. Yet behind the glamour and diamonds, insiders claim Anne's decision carried a message far more devastating than anyone initially understood. By dawn, the palace was already facing a storm it could not contain. Royal analysts, historians, and former staff members were no longer debating whether Anne's appearance had been intentional. The real question had become far more explosive. Was this Princess Anne's way of drawing a permanent line around Queen Elizabeth's legacy and warning Camilla not to cross it again? Inside royal circles, the phrase being whispered was simple but devastating: legacy veto. Reports suggest Anne's choice was interpreted not as an act of vanity, but as a carefully placed barrier. A warning delivered without accusation. A refusal dressed in diamonds. To the outside world, it may have looked like one royal woman wearing a historic tiara to a formal evening. But to those who understand the coded language of the crown, it appeared to say something far sharper. Some things are not yours to claim. Some lines do not move. Some legacies cannot be softened by time. That interpretation spread quickly because the monarchy was already entering a fragile new phase. With King Charles visibly burdened by age, illness, and the endless pressure of public duty, questions about influence had begun to grow louder behind palace walls. Who would shape the tone of the next reign? Who would protect Queen Elizabeth's old standards? Who would decide which traditions survived and which were quietly rewritten? Commentators connected Anne's appearance to those fears almost immediately, arguing that the tiara had become more than an heirloom. It had become a test of power. Palace insiders whispered that Camilla's faction felt publicly humiliated by the gesture. Not because Anne had spoken against them, but because she had not needed to. The silence made it worse. There was no statement to deny, no confrontation to explain, no official insult to challenge. There was only an image that traveled faster than any palace briefing could control. Anne wearing the forbidden piece. Camilla leaving wounded and unsettled. William and Catherine saying nothing. And in monarchy, silence is never empty. It is often where the real message lives. Charles reportedly urged senior figures to calm tensions before the story hardened into a deeper crisis. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, how quickly royal symbolism could become public judgment. One evening could revive decades of memory. One jewel could reopen old suspicions. One emotional departure could make the world wonder whether the queen beside him had been quietly overruled by the sister who had always understood the iron spine of the institution. Yet even Charles's attempts at calm could not erase the uncomfortable truth spreading through the corridors. Anne had acted, and the palace had reacted. William and Catherine's silence was seen as equally strategic. They did not rush to defend Camilla. They did not distance themselves from Anne. They allowed the moment to breathe, and that restraint only sharpened speculation that the future monarchy was already aligning itself with the old guard. Online, Anne was praised as the guardian of the old monarchy, the last hard protector of Queen Elizabeth's sacred trust. Meanwhile, discussions reportedly began to emerge around royal archives, protected heirlooms, ceremonial authority, and who would control the symbols that define legitimacy in the years ahead. Royal historians have long noted that within the firm, symbolic gestures can matter more than official statements. A balcony position, a seating chart, a missing invitation, a tiara returned from silence, each can speak with brutal clarity. And Anne's message, if the insiders are right, was not merely about Camilla. It was about the monarchy itself. But the deeper palace insiders investigated the tiara's sudden return, the more they uncovered whispers of a final royal arrangement, allegedly connected to Queen Elizabeth herself. Even in death, Queen Elizabeth II continues to cast a shadow over the monarchy she spent 70 years protecting. And according to persistent palace whispers, the Tudor tiara may never have truly belonged to any living royal at all. Instead, it was allegedly safeguarded under private understandings designed to preserve what the late queen considered the sacred balance of the crown. That is what made Anne's decision so powerful. It suggested the tiara was not being worn as a decoration, but as a reminder of an old promise. Reports suggest Elizabeth created informal protections around certain heirlooms during her later years, not through loud declarations, but through the quiet discipline that defined her reign. Some pieces were said to represent more than rank. They carried memory. They carried sacrifice. They carried the invisible weight of a monarchy that had survived by knowing when to bend and when to become stone. Anne, insiders claim, became one of the principal guardians of those arrangements. Not because she demanded influence, but because she had earned trust through decades of service without spectacle. She understood the difference between privilege and duty. She understood that some royal symbols could not be treated as personal trophies, especially at a time when the institution was already facing questions about its future. For Anne, the Tudor tiara may have represented her mother's final boundary, a line drawn not against one person, but against the slow erosion of meaning itself. Royal experts quickly connected the controversy to broader succession anxieties. With Charles carrying the burden of the throne under intense pressure, and William preparing for a future that could arrive sooner than anyone expected, The question of who protects the monarchy's deepest symbols became urgent. The phrase bloodline continuity began circulating among commentators, not as a cold rejection of marriage or modern change, but as a reminder that the crown is built on inheritance, sacrifice, and public trust. And in that world, appearances are never merely appearances. They are signals of order. Insiders claim Queen Elizabeth valued duty above status, above personal emotion, above even the comfort of those closest to her. That was the iron law of her reign. She had seen what happened when love, entitlement, and royal symbolism collided. Comparisons were quickly drawn to earlier struggles involving Wallis Simpson, abdication fears, and the painful question of whether private desire could ever be allowed to overpower public responsibility. The Tudor tiara, suddenly, became part of that same haunted conversation. The palace's silence only intensified the storm. No formal explanation came, no clarification was offered. No senior aide stepped forward to dismiss the rumors with authority. And because of that silence, public sympathy began shifting toward Anne. To many, she looked less like a provocateur and more like the last unbending defender of Queen Elizabeth's code. The guardian of tradition, the daughter who remembered what the crown was supposed to mean before ambition, hurt, and influence began pressing against its gates. And while the palace desperately attempted to restore calm, the emotional aftermath of the gala was already reshaping relationships at the highest level of the monarchy. The image of Queen Camilla leaving the gala spread across newspapers, television broadcasts, and royal discussion forums within hours. But insiders insist the real drama unfolded after the cameras disappeared. Behind palace walls, emotions reportedly boiled over as senior aides scrambled to contain what some were privately calling a catastrophic collapse in royal unity. Reports claim Camilla felt personally targeted by Anne's decision, not because a word had been spoken against her, but because the message seemed impossible to misunderstand. The tiara had entered the room like a verdict. It had revived old doubts, old wounds, and old arguments about who truly had the right to carry Queen Elizabeth's most protected symbols into the future. For Camilla, who had spent years fighting her way from public rejection to royal acceptance, the humiliation was said to cut deeper than any headline. It suggested that even after all her endurance, there were still doors inside the monarchy that would not open. Palace staff were reportedly divided almost immediately. Some believed Anne had gone too far, turning a formal gala into a coded confrontation that risked damaging the king's peace. Others saw her actions as necessary, even overdue. A firm reminder that the crown's sacred objects could not become bargaining chips in private influence battles. The split was not loud, but it was dangerous. In royal households, division rarely arrives as shouting. It arrives through changed schedules, cautious briefings, delayed replies, and the sudden coldness of people who once moved as one machine. Charles, insiders say, was emotionally exhausted by the escalation. He had already been carrying the weight of a reign defined by illness, scrutiny, and fragile public confidence. Now he found himself trapped in the most painful position of all, between the wife he had fought to protect and the sister who believed she was protecting their mother's legacy. Reports suggest he urged senior figures to lower the temperature, but the damage had already slipped beyond private control. The story had become public property, and once the public began interpreting the tiara as a royal warning, no palace instruction could fully silence it. Anne, meanwhile, reportedly refused to explain or apologize. That refusal only strengthened the drama. Had she defended herself, the palace might have framed it as misunderstanding. Had she softened the gesture, Camilla's allies might have claimed the moment had been exaggerated. But Anne's silence was colder, heavier, and far more effective. It left the interpretation hanging in the air, daring everyone to deny what they believed they had witnessed. William and Catherine maintained careful neutrality in public, yet their restraint was read as strategic. They did not inflame the crisis, but neither did they rescue Camilla from the symbolism surrounding it. To many observers, this looked like the future monarchy quietly choosing stability over sentiment, continuity over comfort. Media comparisons to past royal crises only intensified fascination, with commentators asking whether this single evening could reshape future ceremonial dynamics. What began as a society gala had become something far more dangerous, a mirror held up to the monarchy's hidden power struggle. And every reflection pointed back to the same truth. But as the monarchy struggled to move forward, one truth had already become impossible to ignore: the Tudor tiara was never simply about jewels. In the end, the most devastating battles inside the House of Windsor are rarely fought with speeches, interviews, or public declarations. They are fought through silence, through symbolism, through a single glance across a ballroom beneath the weight of centuries. And on that unforgettable night, Princess Anne may have delivered one of the clearest royal warnings of the modern era without saying a single word. The gala quickly became more than an evening of ceremony. It became a defining symbolic moment, the kind royal historians revisit, not because of what was officially confirmed, but because of what everyone believed they understood. Anne's reputation as the protector of Queen Elizabeth's legacy strengthened dramatically, especially among those who saw her not as a disruptor, but as the final guardian of an older, stricter monarchy. She had not needed a statement. She had not needed permission. She had simply placed history above her brow and allowed the palace to feel the weight of its own silence. Camilla's emotional exit only deepened the mystery. To some, it looked like personal pain. To others, it looked like public humiliation. But to the palace, it represented something far more dangerous. Evidence that relationships at the highest level of the monarchy had become colder, sharper, and harder to disguise. Every attempt to dismiss the incident as gossip only made the speculation grow. Because if the tiara meant nothing, why did the room change? Why did aides panic? Why did Camilla leave? And why did Anne offer no explanation at all? Royal observers began describing the Tudor tiara as a symbol of legitimacy and continuity. A glittering reminder that the crown is not simply worn, it is inherited, defended, and protected. In that reading, Anne's gesture was not about rivalry. It was about control over memory. It was about who had the moral authority to carry Queen Elizabeth's code forward. And increasingly, William and Catherine were viewed as aligned with that old guard philosophy, careful in public, disciplined in silence, and quietly aware that the future monarchy would need more than popularity to survive. It would need structure, boundaries, a sense of sacred restraint. Charles remained trapped in the center, trying to preserve peace while holding together an institution that seemed to be shifting beneath him. His challenge was brutal: protect his wife from humiliation without appearing to weaken the legacy his mother left behind. Calm the family without surrendering the symbols that still gave the monarchy its authority. The palace, as always, chose silence, but silence did not heal the wound. It preserved it. By the time the scandal began to fade from headlines, something inside the royal story had changed. The monarchy emerged quieter, colder, and more divided beneath the surface than ever before. Anne had reminded everyone that tradition does not disappear simply because it becomes inconvenient. Camilla had learned that acceptance and authority are not always the same thing. And the Tudor tiara, once hidden from public view, had become a warning that history still has teeth. Because inside the House of Windsor, jewels are never just jewels, they are power, memory, and the silent language of legacy itself. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.